Kazuchika Okada headed to WWE, maybe, sort of, kind of. Weird story, this one.
He might be Punk's opponent.
But Sports Illustrated covering an Okada story is kind of wild in itself. Might tell you what the source is on the Okada story that's been doing the rounds over the last few days, JP. But yeah, apparently, according to SI, Okada is set to become a free agent in 2024, as his contract expires at the end of January, as you helpfully put in our show notes earlier. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. So there's every other New Japan wrestler's contracted in January. But this one does feel a little bit different. One, that the story's made it to this point. Two, that WWE are a potential suitor. Like Dave Meltzer was saying it on his radio show, that like there's always been interest, but they actually feel like they might get him this time. There's always going to be the AEW interest, but like we always, like, you know, when we were talking about Ospreay, it's like, hopefully we got it across. We know Ospreay's one of the best wrestlers in the world. Cool. Like, if I run a wrestling company, I'd want to, but it doesn't necessarily mean like there's space for him, you know? Maybe he's an exceptional case and you just force it in regardless, but there's still a conversation to be had of where he actually fits in the grand scheme of things, even if you do probably want to make that work. Okada's that times 10. You know, at one point, the best wrestler in the world. I'm not sure if I still believe that anymore, but, you know, maybe I've just got a little bit bored of him the last couple of years. But he feels like he'd be surplus to requirements for AEW as well. But I think it's just generally the fact that it's even a talking point. You know, there's all kinds going on with New Japan right now. Yeah, nobody talks about Tag League. All people complain about is the new NJPW World player being a complete piece of shit. There's a lot of like strife backstage. You know, Kevin Kelly, leaving is quite a notable one recently, and there are little murmurings you hear about, you know, things not being great from a money point of view in Japan for the foreign workers, and just generally maybe the business side of things isn't where you'd want it to be with New Japan. All of that together actually does present like this is. It's coming from Sports Illustrated, but it feels like a bit of a clickbait story. But I don't know, is there smoke to this fire, JP, with all of that said?
I think there is. I'm not very surprised. The story that we'd always been told with Okada, and in terms of what his contract, that he was the one person who was signed to a long-term contract. Mm. But if we look at this and we're realistically, from his perspective, in many ways, it's Harry Kane at Tottenham Hotspur. He's done everything he can do there. He's never going to be getting like the big kind of recognition because it's still ultimately the kind of, you know, big fish, small pond, he says in his best slagging off Spurs type way.
Spoken like a true Arsenal fan.
Oh, exactly. He says, yeah, who fucking scraped a winner over Luton tonight, 4-3, which that'll be the first thing I'm looking at in bed is those fucking highlights. And what the hell happened there? But do I think he's going to go? I mean, Justin Barrasso has a habit of this where there's big stories that end up going to him, and it's partly because it's the platform, it's Sports Illustrated. And when it happens in this way, you think to yourself, okay, this is going to be something that's big. I think he looks at WWE. You've got to remember that TNA experience he went through, it kind of scarred him, like in terms of like coming over. But it also, in many ways, it kind of made him probably a bit more like kind of hard-nosed to what kind of worker he wants to be wanted to be in New Japan. But he's done everything in New Japan, and he holds pretty much all of the records, and he already is a kind of legend, and he's 36. And if you think to himself, he does 5 years at a regular 7-figure salary, he can sort out dates. Like, it's a big deal, and WWE are going to be treated. This is the first time we'd be coming in with somebody treating him like with a proper level of respect. That there wouldn't be this cloud of the promo. Do I think it'd automatically work? No. Because as we've seen, like I thought when they signed Shinsuke Nakamura, a lot of us thought, oh, Christ, this is like a real, you know, imagine there was a time when the Good Brothers leaving New Japan and you thought, oh, no, this is going to be trouble for them. They coped fine. And sometimes it brings out the best in New Japan. And I think it's going to move them. It's just going to move them to like forcing them to use the younger guys who they've threatened to use for a long time. And
feels like it's happening already. Feels like they're making that move.
Because my prediction would be Naito beats Sanada for the belt, and then Yota Tsuji pretty much beats Naito for the belt at the same way that like Okada beat Tanahashi, and you get into that stage, and will get Shota Umino into the mix, and you might get your Ren Naritas and the various other people that they kind of brought through, which is something they've needed to do for a long time in terms of refreshing their own roster. And they can't offer that money. And I think they creatively need it, New Japan, for something like this. And Okada needs a creative challenge. It's just him going to AEW. There's always, I don't like the off ramp, say, that Ospreay has of, he can work New Japan. In some ways, no, you want to see a wrestler kind of put like a nail in that. Like that's their bit of the career done. And in many ways, him going back there every once in a while, it doesn't feel like has he ever really left. And in AEW, it's too packed. And like this, and that's my overall issue with it is, whereas in WWE, given who they are, I think it's a better move for him. I mean, I said the same thing about Will Ospreay, but it turned out him living in the UK. And maybe he doesn't want to leave Japan. And he doesn't need to. There's all the kind of personal stuff that comes into it. And maybe AEW will offer him that kind of deal as well. But I think this is as good if he's ever going to go to WWE, he should go now.
Yeah.
But I think he's leaving New Japan. Yeah. I don't think these stories come out for no apparent reason. And I think he should leave.
It's interesting because I can see both sides on it. Like, you can get into like, will Okada actually be a fit on Week to Week TV? I don't know. Not based on his presentation. Like, it was like any of the angles he did for the Forbidden Door shows. It was just, he was like this awkward, gangly, non-English speaking guy, just bloke wandering out in his white t-shirt and his blue jeans. Looks a bit like Punk at Survivor Series, but less cool. It was just like, you take him out of that presentation, and the weaknesses do show. Now, on that note, like, I can see it both ways. I think on the one hand, you kind of want the good guys to win, or at least what we've traditionally called the good guys in AEW. And like, you want an Ospreay. We want to still see him have the best matches he can have. And most likely that's in AEW. He goes to WWE, might have a better career. He might be, dare I say it, based on current evidence, might even get booked better. But we all saw what happened with Ricochet. So let's maybe, Punk breaks a little bit. But, just from a smart fan wants to see good matches point of view, it's clearly a win for the good guys. Yeah. Ospreay going to AEW. And there's also, at least from that point of view, the win of he's still going to do New Japan and do the big matches. If just from a pure fan point of view, I want to see that. Same would probably go for Okada, although, yeah, again, it just all appeals that little bit less. But there is a point to what you're saying. Like, although that's the obvious benefit, the negative is you don't have that full cutoff point. It doesn't feel fresh. Ospreay in AEW, because he's kind of already been in AEW. Him in there full time is a different, or more full time, is a different perspective, and he can be a bigger part of All In next year. So at least there's that. But it's not that fresh, is it? Especially if he is still doing New Japan. So I do see your point, and that would be the case with Okada as well. But it goes back to what we were saying, I think, either on the weekend show or on last week's Spotlight, and I was saying on the show with Steph, Triple H is very clearly, and whether it's working in practice or not, because I did get a bit of a pushback to those comments, like, he's clearly trying to, it's a point he's doing on purpose, making sure that the Hispanic talent are treated as individuals and booked competently. And, even stuff like little stuff like, Damian Priest leading into that side of his personality, old man Vince McMahon would probably not have him, wouldn't be allowed to call senior Money in the Bank. You know what I mean? That wouldn't, no, you're supposed to be a goth. You can't also, talk about, your heritage and stuff like that. You're one or the other, in old man Vince's line, but you've got like a laundry list of names across the roster, some of which have been, like the LWO ganged up into stables together. So there is that element of it, but there's a lot of Spanish-speaking talent on the shows that are unique characters and pushed well, and given they're not just generic stereotypes. Same things kind of happening with the Japanese talent in WWE. For a Tozawa, who clearly is a caricature. Nakamura is probably on the more positive end of a bit of a caricature. He's basically doing Great Muta, but he is being protected and booked. You only have to look at the women's division and look at, the talent across that, like an Asuka who's been pushed for a number of years. And like, there's a number of them there who have been, relatively protected and relatively given, a bit of a stage to be a star. they're doing that on purpose. I think maybe that is with a view to get more talent like an Okada to come over, with a view to Triple H always liked that idea, didn't he? You know, it wasn't just an NXT thing. I want an NXT UK and I want NXT Europe and I want NXT Japan. He is a man who sees things in a more global way, I think, than Vince McMahon does. And maybe he doesn't necessarily want to do those NXT silos anymore, but he wants those global stars. He wants those regional global stars in those different places. It's the Fast and Furious thing. Like, why was that the biggest film in world history? Because it had a diverse cast that represented the world that we live in. It's not just 10 Paul Walkers. You know what I mean? It's a smorgasbord of different races, sexes, and people from different places, and that appealed to a more of a worldwide like demographic. I think that's absolutely a Triple H business plan. And probably a Nick Khan plan as well. And I think Okada would fit in that perfectly. And I think they are, for all, I can't necessarily see him on Raw and SmackDown and imagine what that looks like, but it's not as ridiculous a proposition as it was under Vince McMahon WWE.
That's it. Like, under Vince McMahon WWE, that wouldn't have happened. All of these things. And they are, even though they're all rooted in fundamentally like business and capitalism and the business of making money through the use of diversification and niche markets and everything else, it's still it's a sensible business decision. Like, it's the most sensible business decision. And you try selling that to TKO, this is what my bigger plan is. They're going to look at that and go, yeah, because what have UFC done? They run loads of fucking different places all over the world. And they're like, yeah, this is going to completely work. And it also explains, as much as we don't like it, the booking of Nakamura. Of like, actually, we're using Nakamura in a consistent basis, in a strong way, in top line programs. As much as the matches will end up disappointing and everything else, that's like a come and get me to Okada, of like kind of throwing that into the mix of like, look, this isn't, AEW is not the only place where you can go to, and you would do that, and it's a natural kind of like starting place as well for them to be able to. And the way that they'll push like these two met in a tournament final, they won't mention which tournament, and the match they'll have won't be anywhere near as good as that. And like you say, the week to week and the reality of Okada in WWE isn't something that's particularly exciting. But the idea of them getting him, I think, again, this is one where they lost Ospreay pretty much because of a heart over head decision. Here, I think this is going to be one where there's going to be like, no, actually, we should really make a play for this guy, because it's a big into a market where they don't really do very well, like, in the scheme of things. If you think of how much like wrestling is consumed in Japan, they don't sell out Sumo Hall. They don't sell it. Like, they don't run Budokan. They don't run the Dome. They've helped out a few times for that type of stuff, but they've never really caught on. And I think also as well, it gives them the chance to produce, like, again, it's all incremental stuff, but taking away that that smaller part of the hardcore fan base who are going to want to see what Okada is doing if they manage to get there, which then in turn hurts their competition. So they'll look at this as being like, this is like a common sense business decision. I mean, I'm talking about as if the place he's going to end up out of all of this is going to be WWE. It's just that you sort of think about him going to AEW, and all of a sudden it's like, dare I say it, my heart sinks. Like, I kind of, think to myself, well, where's he going to... He has the great matches with a few other people. He'll be in isolation, but when he's appeared on TV, he's never been used to it. He's just like, a random tag match, and it's Okada, and guess what? He's one of the best wrestlers in the world. And you're like, really? That's how we end up with... that.
You'll get shown that. You get told it. Like, that's the thing, innit? And this is all part of like the current war that's going on in the background, as well as just black and white. Will they move numbers? What are the ratings? Like, there is a public perception battle going on. WWE is winning a lot of these battles. Ospreay was a win for AEW, but this would be another win for Triple H. They get to be the good guys again, because oh my god, it's like when it was it's his game plan. It's what he did with NXT. Like, did you actually believe Fergal Devitt was ever going to be a mainstream WWE star? Did I ever believe that El Generico and Kevin Steen were going to be big stars in WWE? Triple H made those things happen, and it got him untold goodwill and flower baskets from Reddit with a W. Like, and he's doing that. Like, I mean, it links into like another story that's doing the rounds at time of recording. Like Sean Ross Sapp said on his audio, I believe, tonight about Mercedes and other, alleged New Japan star, and also alleged AEW. I feel like it was a fever dream. AEW star say it was a fever dream as all seeing her in the crowd at Wembley in a boot allegedly. Remember that? That's a real thing that happened this year. But Sean Ross Sapp saying apparently there's more of a possibility now in his mind of Mercedes / Sasha Banks heading to WWE, at least more so than he thought in August, apparently, which was all in. Apparently, there was a working plan for her to and an AEW to work together, and apparently Sean Ross Sapp followed up on that. Has been told there's no active plan for that to happen. That ties in with the little whispers you're hearing, and the fact that Punk was allegedly a big part of Mercedes coming over to AEW and was in conversation with her. He's now on the WWE side. You have to imagine what he's probably told her about what it's like working in AEW. And all of a sudden, I think we're in a different landscape in a lot of ways, JP, where it was like AEW was the cool promotion and you wanted your Danielsons and your Punks to go there. And especially fans like us to see them work in a different way than they did in WWE. And that was just a given. I still want that from a work point of view, but like from a fan goodwill point of view, there's probably going to be more pull for her to make peace with Triple H and more of a guarantee when you look at a Sasha Banks that she'll probably be booked better under Triple H. And the women's division is clearly Triple H's Achilles heel for whatever reason, despite his successes with NXT. With a couple of notable exceptions, he's not really done a great job of booking the WWE women's division. But is it a division with stars? Yes. And is it booked more competently than AEW's? Probably also yes, but it's more of a race to the bottom. But still, yes. She probably might look at it and go, "Oh, my mates are in WWE, and Triple H is in charge now, and it's going to be different. Maybe it's time for me to go back." If I was a veteran man, I'd say she ends up in WWE rather than AEW at this point.
I think so, and I think she looks at AEW and she goes, "Okay, is my stock going to fall if I go to AEW? Potentially, yeah. Has the grass been really, truly greener since she's left? Well, I mean, the injury is going to be the thing that mess into it, but it's not like
all the time though.
Yeah, it did buy her time as much as anything, and in some ways, you wonder if she dodged a bullet, and I wonder if she thinks did she dodge a bullet throughout all of this, because it felt like when she left, there was talk of various kind of like behind closed doors lawsuits, NDAs, and the rest of it. Like there was, and it felt like it was like a level of anger about Vince and the Vince problem not being there, and it definitely not being Triple H as being the issue.
Or at least not being in your face.
Yeah,
he's there, but it's the specter of Vince rather than the week to week.
Yeah, and that but not being there's a massive. Is she going to come in and be booked like she's a big star in a way with her most like kind of recognizable brand name? Yeah. Do you think TKO going to have issues about her doing acting and stuff in The Mandalorian? No. Guess what? They'll probably fucking embrace it because they should have done all along. But Vince was like, "Well, it's not a WWE Studios film, so therefore I'm zero interest in it. It doesn't exist in the real world, even if it's part of fucking Star Wars." Like those kind of things are going to be seen as a big deal. Will it be an embarrassment for AEW? Yeah. But if you're her at the minute and you're thinking, where am I going to make the most money? Where am I going to be better booked? Where is there going to be much more scope for me to do stuff outside of wrestling? You've got to say it's WWE for all of those things.
If you were advising her, what would you say if she came to JP? Where's the go?
WWE.
I'd say it too. That's mad, isn't it? Like 6 months ago, I wouldn't have said that.
Exactly. You look at New Japan, not in a great way. The IWGP Women's Belt, very much an afterthought. Stardom on a downturn, partly because of just the relentless schedule they've been running and all of the injuries. Look at Julia, the person who was going to be the big star. She was going to be wrestling in all of this. Well, Julia's there's a chance she might be off as well. So you get into those kind of things and you think, well, where is this level of big stardom? Is there new faces in the women's division? Like, there's a Rhea Ripley story that you can go to. There's the return of Bianca Belair. There's all the various dynamics with, whether it be with Damage Control or, and obviously the Four Horsewomen, something that they've always wanted to do and go ahead there as well. So there's all of that stuff. He should definitely take credit for that. But it'll be a big black eye to AEW for that to be the case. But then there's the part of me thinks that this has been their get out of jail free cards. We sign people to deviate away from problems. like they're bloody Manchester United under the Glazers. And you go, no, sorry, I'm big on the football analogies tonight. You go, no, in some ways, what it forces you, when they've been forced to, AEW, to kind of work with the resources they have, I think in Reese, it's worked better for them. Julia Hart, and, spoke about, not nowhere near the finished article and whatnot. But in some ways, they want to spend more time concentrating on the likes of her and getting her to a place than spending a fortune on Mercedes, where she's not going to be a prime focus of that show, like, regardless. And you don't have the faith in how the women's division is going to be booked there.
They just wouldn't, would they? We've seen enough evidence. They wouldn't. Like, it would be a layup. It would be a gigantic star coming over. We all thought it was happening around Wembley. It would be the most AW thing ever. One, for it not to happen. But if it did happen, to fuck it up anyway. Like, she's got to see that. And if she speaks to people like Punk, and if morale is as low in AEW as we're reading, like, I can't imagine there's much pull, really. And she's got it out of system a little bit, being out to WWE and going to Japan and stuff, and it hasn't gone to the full fruition because of her injury. So that's a bit of a negative, and maybe puts a little bit of doubt in my mind that she still wants to, sow some seeds and work outside of the WWE.
Done a gap here.
Yeah, she kind of had it. It hasn't gone perfectly on a gap year. She had a snowboarding accident, and unfortunately they put her in the boot for a while. But she still had a gap year, and at some point you've got to come back to reality. And I think that's probably going to be reality. As Andy says, it might just turn out it would be the most wrestling thing ever. Punk, Mercedes, Okada, all these people signed for WWE, which is the good guy Triple H brand. And then Vince comes back and he's like, hang on, pal. Yeah. Who are all these people who speak funny? What's going on? What are they doing back here? Get out. Wouldn't shock me, but yeah, genuinely one to keep an eye on. I think the Okada and Mercedes stories, I think, might be quite closely tied. Yeah, look, Ramen says, original plan, Forbidden Door against Saraya. Like, imagine what our review of that match would have been, doesn't shock me. But yeah, there we go. Nice little rundown of the possible free agents out there right now, JP.